Crop Talk TV podcast. Peace.
Here is the question. Hey, big fan of you on Locked On 49 podcast. I'm gonna have a question. Doesn't need to be a part of the mailbag portion of the pod or anything, but when did Aiyuk take over Deebo as wide receiver one? I always thought Samuel was our main guy, but obviously the talk is that Aiyuk is and is ranked higher for fantasy wide receiver. Would appreciate your take. Thank you. So that's a question right there from Justin. Basically, a long way of saying, when the hell did Aiyuk become the 49ers wide receiver one? Why is he higher from a fantasy standpoint? You know, what's up with that? And, you know, I want to get your thoughts on that before I answer.
Personally, if we were looking at it from a fantasy standpoint, with all the pitches to Deebo, which count as technically receptions, and then that's
yeah,
PR. So, fantasy standpoint, I like Deebo because I think Deebo can get you cheap touchdowns. Deebo could be, 5-yard line. They'll throw a jet sweep to Deebo instead of giving it to Mostert or Jeff Wilson. The fall in the end zone. Deebo got a lot of just touchdowns like that, especially if Trey Lance is the quarterback. Because Trey Lance, you could keep that. He could keep it, or he could give it to him. And like they're gonna get so many cheap touchdowns. But I don't even want to get into that. I don't want to get excited about Trey yet because
we'll get there down the line once training camp starts. We'll get there.
But yeah, I think from a fantasy standpoint, I think Deebo does have more value strictly because of the PPR and all those pitches. Those are catches and behind the line screens that he's going to get more than Aiyuk. But as far as in your traditional West Coast offense, your traditional X, Aiyuk is it because what was it? The Bills? What was it? The Monday night, the Bills game?
Yeah.
Des tweeted out, "That's baby Julio." Like in an ideal world, Aiyuk, to a lesser extent, obviously he's not as big, not as fast, but Dez is on to something because I started after he said that, I started looking. I'm like, is he crazy though, or does he have a point? Like, and I started, and even with the games was still fast for him and that's why I can't wait to see him year two, especially playing alongside with Deebo because they're going to offset each other very well. The game was a little too fast for him sometimes. And also inconsistent quarterback play. He had to deal with Mullins in and out of the lineup, Mullins and Beathard, and then Jimmy in and out. So he never had a good he never really had a solid quarterback. He dealt with his own injuries. So all that was a perfect storm, and he still had a solid year. Go ahead.
I got a question for you. So just to kind of elaborate, and this is why people come to, whether it's me and a lot of people that I'm bringing on. All right, so this is going to be a great chance for you to kind of put out that knowledge of what it's like to play receiver. But you mentioned that the game was a little fast for Aiyuk.
Yeah.
Explain to everybody that's watching right now what exactly that means.
Fast as far as there were times where even just the replay, because again, I don't have all 22, so I haven't really actually broke down a ton of just real game film, but just from watching the game as not a casual observer, but as somebody who played, like there were tons of plays where I could just see whether it be a ball late, whether him cutting off a route, meaning when I say cut off, I mean if he's supposed to be at a 10 to 12 yard depth on a dig, he's maybe 8 or 9 yards on it and cutting it short, where he was he was in a hurry. And I've been there before. You're in a hurry, you're thinking, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta get open, I might get the ball here. And then, the timing is off, the ball's behind. There was a lot of, you notice he made a lot of catches behind him. He did a lot of that because timing was off. He was playing sometimes too fast. The game was moving very, very fast for him. And I could tell that early on. As the season went on, though, and as he started to get a feel of the offense, he started to get more plays that were catered to him, so to speak, especially when Deebo was out. I saw it started to slow down for him. I think the Bills game, I want to say his Bills game was probably one of his best overall games, where it was just looking like, oh yeah, he's about to be that guy. You know what I mean? And I think once the game started slowing down and he started getting a feel of himself and started to trust his body and trust his skills and trust what he saw out there, man, the sky's the limit for Brandon Aiyuk. And I wasn't as high on the pick as you were. I don't know what you had him at that year. I really don't. Croc, in the draft, I remember I know you had Justin. You definitely had Justin Jefferson high. You were selling me on Justin Jefferson for a while, and
I wanted Justin Jefferson. I wanted Justin. Yeah,
and I could see why you liked. I still think Aiyuk's better than Justin Jefferson, given if he had the stability, Justin Jefferson had a lot of stability, and he got to play with he got to be the number 2 to Thielen all last year. So had Aiyuk got to be basically the 1-2 whatever with Deebo last year, I and had stable quarterback play, even though Kirk Cousins, he still was in the lineup. He didn't miss a game. So I envision that for kind of season for Aiyuk had he had that, with Justin Jefferson, because I think pound for pound, I think he's better than Justin Jefferson. I don't know what your take is on that, but I still think, I know you had Justin Jefferson, higher than him, along with guys like CeeDee Lamb. I don't know where you had Ruggs, but that doesn't matter. No, Aiyuk has it all. He has it all, and that's why he surpassed him. But for your fantasy purposes, hey, I would still roll the dice on Deebo, just because I still think Deebo is going to haul in more, especially around the goal line. I think they're going to start featuring him more now that he's healthy, like he did in the first year. He got a ton of those little sweeps around the goal line his first year. So I think they're going to do a lot more of that, and those are catches in PPR leagues. So
right. So in your opinion, you feel like from fantasy purposes, Deebo can be utilized in more ways to get cheap yardage and touchdowns. So you'd still go with Deebo in a sense of fantasy, but from a pure receiver standpoint, Aiyuk is the guy, and you think he's going to be a legit guy. And I think there's something to that, because Deebo can have 50 yards receiving in the game, but then also 30 rushing and a touchdown, where
right.
Aiyuk, most of his work, especially with Deebo on the field, is going to likely be done through the air.
Through the air and downfield. Now, I say that in a different offense, though. You put Aiyuk in Kansas City's offense, that's a different story. I think he's going crazy.
Crop Talk TV podcast. Peace.